Alright, today we're going to make this Predator Bio Mask. I built this without any sort of templates or pattern. I just kind of freehanded it and did it as I went along. There are some great Pepcore patterns online that you can download, but I wanted to make my own custom one that wasn't really based on anything in canon or otherwise. And I feel like it came out pretty good. And this is part one because I still have to do a few small things to this, like put lenses in the eyes. But the main thing is I need to build the back side of it with the dreads, and I need to figure out how to make some skin-looking surface in between the mask and the dreads, and also fit it to my head to make sure it fits nice and tight. So that'll be in a part two. But for now, let's go ahead and get into this. Alright, so to start off for this whole biomask thing, I have EVA foam, and I have a lot of it. This is all 5mm, but I also have 2 and 3 hiding out, and that's going to be the main base of the mask. Shock is most of my videos. And I'm also going to need a flashlight. Just going to be attached to the mask to act as the laser targeting sight for the Yautja Bio Mask. And I'm going to start building this from the top down. And believe it or not, I don't have patterns or templates for this. I'm going to make it up as I go along, for better or worse. I don't know whether that's a good idea or a terrible idea, but that's what I'm going to do. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out what I want my dome piece to look like, which is the very top of the Yautja Bio Mask, and I'm going to build from there down. Alright, so I cut out a circle of EVA foam, and I just guesstimated roughly how big I wanted it in conjunction with the size of my own head, because this is going to be made to fit me. And I heated the one side pretty heavily, which gave it a natural dome shape. And then I just creased it where I wanted the center of the brow to be. And next I'm going to go in where this crease is. I'm going to cut a triangle out, just like this. And then I'm going to take some adhesive. You could use contact cement or super glue. I'm going to use super glue, and I'm going to glue it back together. And glued together looks something like this. And you'll notice now there's kind of a sharp curve off. What that point is going to represent on the actual mask is this point here, where the Predator has those dreadlock looking things coming out the back, and the actual face mask comes down here. The next piece I'm going to cut is going to be some overlay bands that are going to come up here. Okay, so to make my next pattern piece, I took the leftover piece that I cut this circle out of, and I traced the circle onto another piece of 5mm EVA foam. And within that circle, I drew the way that I wanted one side of the pattern to go and how it's going to overlap over this. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut half of this out, and I drew lines here where the center of my circle is, and I'm going to fold this piece that I cut out here over, and that's how I'm going to trace the rest of the pattern. I'm going to cut the whole thing out. Okay, I've cut this side, folded it over, traced it out, and that'll complete my pattern. I'll go ahead and cut all this out. Okay, now that the whole piece is out, I need to start heating this foam up with a heat gun. And the reason for that is I'm going to need to put some shape to this. If I just glue this on flat, it's not going to look good. I'm going to need to curve this end down somewhat here. And as far as the edges go, you could do anything extreme from heating the foam and gluing it with a flare like that, which I may do to some extent. I'm not really 100% sure what I'm going to do with this. Or what I'm probably going to do is heat it and put some curvature in it, just so that it matches up a little better on this. Right, I put the heat and the curvature into this. See, it's got some shape. And then I also curved these this way. And the first point of contact that I want to glue on is the center here. And since I'm using the side I drew on as the bottom, I can actually take and use the cut line and the center line that I drew to help line this up to glue it. But I'm just going to apply some glue right in here and just glue the center, because these side pieces are going to have to be manipulated and glued on individually. Alright, now that the center is glued on, next I'm going to glue on these side pieces. Now, I could glue them relatively flat, and it'd look really good. I could put them up at more of an angle, and it'd look even better, but it would be a lot harder. And you know what? I've decided I'm going to glue them up at an angle and make this even more complicated. Alright, now that I have it glued on here, let me see, I glued it on the edges, and I used super glue. And the next thing I'm going to do, you're going to notice here, One side is different than the other. I already trimmed this side, but next I'm going to trim this side. You can see it's still round. I'm going to trim it up to follow the line of this, because both of these are going to have a piece going along the edge to close it off. Alright, now that I have it trimmed down equally on both sides, I'm also going through with some hot glue and just putting a bead on the inside of this here. Careful not to get it on any of these outer edges, as I'm going to have to glue more foam to it. But I'm putting it in there just to give it a little reinforcement. You can see I got about halfway. I'm going to do this on both sides. Alright, now that this has been all sealed off with some hot glue on the inside here, I need to cover this whole entire space here. And how I'm going to do that is I took a piece of scrap EVA foam and I just kind of trimmed it until I got it to fit along this contour. It's going to be glued on the inside here with contact cement. And once I got the general outline and shape that I wanted, I traced that out and duplicated it. So now I have one for each side. I'm going to go ahead and glue that in using some contact cement. Okay, so this part was a little bit tricky. I contact cemented this on, and then I cut out the way I wanted it to look. I took the excess here and traced it, you can see here onto my other piece, and that completes the pattern. So I'm going to cut that out and contact cement this cutout piece onto this side. Okay, and I glued on both sides so it matches up. And next, what I'm going to do is start working on the main features of the face, starting with the top with the brows and working down. For the next pattern piece, I took a piece of 5mm EVA foam and I just kind of roughly cut it until I got the shape that I wanted, because I couldn't leave it straight, because whenever I would glue it in to the top piece here, it would be curved in, and I want it to stick out like this. So I had to curve it. This curve was a little bit too much, but I rounded it out and did this final pattern piece. I haven't glued it in yet, but I am going to position it, and I'm going to glue it on the underside here, on the back side through here with some hot glue. But I need it to sit enough, oh, see, it already slipped forward. I needed it to sit enough forward that I have the top part of the hat angled, but this being relatively straight. Alright, I glued this on by scobbing a bunch of hot glue on the back so it was nice and sturdy. And I heated the backside real hot in certain sections slowly so that I could get this downward curvature here and the curve here and here on the front, and the indents here on either side, and the other curl here. Now, this actual cut line here is actually going to be the top of your vision, where the actual visor area is going to be. And everything's going to be built down from here next. Okay, so to make the pattern for the face, I folded a piece of paper in half, and I've sketched out the pattern. I may have to do some trimming after the fact to get this to bend and fold exactly how I want, but I'm going to cut it with it folded so that whenever I open it up, you'll have the full pattern done and cut out. It looks like this. Next, just to give you guys a little idea, I'm going to trace this onto some 5mm EVA foam. And if it hasn't been clear enough, it's going to fold here, up here, and on these sides. And these corners here, and here, 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 all these corners are going to get glued together. Okay, here's a pattern cut out on a 5mm EVA foam. I wanted to show you real quick that I did cut all these edges beveled, which just means I cut them with an angle. And that angle, even in the nooks, is to help it line up better whenever I fold it over and glue it all together. So to glue all this together, I am going to use contact cement, but before I glue it all together, I went through and heated it with the heat gun to help form it and shape it. That way, whenever I contact cement it, it'll just go right where I want it. Alright, so I glued the mouthpiece on, and I used super glue for that. And I put another piece of EVA foam in there just to reinforce it. And I also put hot glue over that to reinforce it further to make it nice and stiff. Okay, and next, what I did was I took and cut out, traced a shape on here, and just kind of cut out what I wanted for the side piece. But I'm going to need to do two things with this. One is to get it to have a curve this way and an S shape the other way. And to show you an example of what I mean, I've already gone ahead and done this. Okay, put the S shape in this way and then put a curve in this way, because this is going to glue into the mask here, go around the corner. I'm going to go ahead and heat this other side, glue the two in, let you see what it looks like. Alright, so I have the sides here glued on, and if you're wondering as to why I'm making it in this particular fashion, there is a reason. And the reason is this flashlight. I still have some modification to do to this flashlight, but in the meantime, what I'm doing is I left this over here open because I need to put this flashlight in here. It has to be mounted in. And on the other side, there's something else I have to put in as well. And each pattern, each side, and each piece I'm going to cut is going to be different, so that all this fits in and looks flush. Alright, so this flashlight here had way more bulbs than I needed. I really only needed 3. So I took a red Sharpie Extreme Fade Resistant. These cost a little more, but they work pretty good. And I colored all the bulbs red, and then I took a piece of 2mm black EVA foam, and I glued it inside. So now I have just the 3 red light pattern coming out of it. And as you'll notice, there's a little light escaping around the edges. I am going to go back through later with some paint and just seal that and cover that over so it doesn't escape. But for the meantime, what I'm going to do is, before I start gluing this in, positioning it, putting support pieces, anything, what I'm going to do is I am going to mask this off. I'm going to mask it off now instead of trying to mask it off later whenever I need to, seal the foam and then paint it. I don't want to have to do it then. I'm just going to go ahead and mask this end off now. Alright, I cut 2 strips about 1 inch wide and heated and bent them on the bottom and glued them in. And then, even though there wasn't much to this, I just super glued it and sealed it with some hot glue to help hold everything in place. There wasn't much to this, but it took a really, really long time in order to get everything lined up and put in place to make sure that it was all even before I could actually glue it. And now I'm going to move on to working on putting the light over here on the side of it. Alright, in order to make this easier to glue in, I took some 3mm EVA craft foam and I wrapped it around this and glued it on with some super glue. And next I took and cut a notch so that this will fit nicely in there. I'm going to go ahead and glue this in place with some super glue and then reinforce it with some hot glue and some more EVA foam. Alright, so I got the light glued in. I just used some super glue to put it in place, and then I just globbed, this is really ugly, but it works. I just globbed a bunch of hot glue on the back of it just to make sure it stays in place, and I was careful to make sure, that it didn't affect this, so I could still, screw it and unscrew it and turn it off and on. Now I've just got to start sizing and piecing and cutting pieces that are going to fit and fill this in. And once I get these side pieces built, I'm going to do some reinforcing on the inside of this. And once that's all done, I'm going to start doing all the detail work and sanding and everything else. Alright, I took a piece of my scrap 5mm EVA foam and just cut out a hunk of it and started trimming it until I got it to the size and shape that I wanted. And from there, I heated it and I glued this on using super glue, and I glued the top area here first and then glued this bottom seam, and lastly glued the little piece that forms the edge of the eye hole and attaches to the flashlight as well. Yeah, so that's on there, and I'm pretty happy with the way that this looks so far. Looks pretty cool, and I like the shape of it. Pretty stoked on all this. And next I'm gonna start doing the other side. So for the opposite side of the mask, I need to make the area with the port where the little hoses or tubes or whatever plug in. And for that, I have a piece of coil tubing I had laying around, and I have a piece of 3mm EVA foam that I punched 3 holes into. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around it and super glue it to it. Okay, so you'll notice on the other side I glued the actual light in first and then made the piece around it. But this time I had to do the opposite. I had to fit the piece and then cut out where I wanted the porthole and the shape of it and put it in. Alright, now that I have the other side glued in, I'm going to go through with a Dremel, and I'm going to use the Dremel to start sanding a lot of these edges. I'm going to smooth and round this out, and some of these seams I'm going to go ahead and sand down too, and I'm going to do the main rough body of the sanding with the Dremel, and I'm going to switch over to regular sandpaper. Alright, after just a little bit of dremeling here on the top, you can see, or at least I feel, this makes a huge improvement. Unless, of course, you want a square edge, but I want that rounded, semi-sleek look that their biomasks have, and that's a pretty easy way to achieve it. Alright, now I'm done with all the sanding. I've begun to just start to finish decorating this. You can do this however you want. So I'm not going to go into super detail on this because it's all kind of your own choice. And it's going to have this scoop here off the front, which is going to act as a respirator cover. And for the respirator, I'm going to use this piece with this mesh that I took off of an old hairdryer. So I'm just going to be creative and look around with what I have and start putting this whole thing together for the rest of the way. Okay, continuing along and showing you some of my progress here with all the stuff I'm doing. I did add some pieces here that I heated and curved on the side, and also extended this up into the top part of the mask. And I took the Dremel and sanded down along all these edges here on the extension, and yeah, I'm pretty stoked with how this looks so far. I'm going to continue on with my detailing and decoration. Alright, now that I have pretty much all the sanding caught up and all the main large detail pieces, I may put some smaller things here and there, but for right now that's pretty much it. I've already started to go in and reinforce the inside. Like these edges, I contact cemented some other pieces of EVA foam that I heated, and this is going to help give it a little bit more stability. You could always use thicker foam, but with a thicker foam I have a harder time getting the finer details, like in the brows. You'll see I also put a piece in there to help reinforce it, and reinforced all the joints that I glued with contact cement with hot glue. Now it's ugly to look at, but you won't see it. Although stuff like this does bother some people. And the next thing is I need to start putting some padding. Like here in the forehead, I'm going to put some hunks of EVA foam mat, because this isn't going to go on my face like this. It's going to go, at an angle as I'm wearing it, because that's the shape of the Yautja's head. So in order to have it fit flush against my head, I'm going to have to put some padding in there. Alright, so next what I'm doing here is moving on to siliconing, and this is what I use for that. And what I do is I put some silicone wherever I want it. For example, right now I'm using it to seal up these edges, and I also used it to put sort of a teeth skull face pattern into the mouthpiece of the mask itself. And what I'm going to do is I take some silicone and I go ahead and I apply it to the area. Right where I need it. Just kind of dab it on. And you can see there it doesn't look very good. So if you want to get it smooth, like everywhere else, what you're going to have to do is you need to have yourself a little container of water. Okay. And I wipe off my finger clear all as much of the excess silicone off of it. I'm going to go ahead and dip my finger in the water and use my finger to spread this all out. Okay, so now it's much smoother than the dabby blotty mess that it was. And this at the end too, the smoother I get it now, the less sanding I have to do. But I will end up going back and sanding a lot of these areas smooth. Alright, so I got all the siliconing done. I did a lot more with the silicone than I thought I was going to. Like putting the look of the open mouth and the very skeletal looking features here in the front, and even going as far as doing the sides. But the nice thing is certain areas, like right here, I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but it's smooth enough right in here, like I don't even have to sand it. Sanding is going to be pretty minimal, just in these channels and on some of these joints here where I had to silicone it. And maybe along this edge. And to sand this, I'm going to use some 600 grit sandpaper. Alright, now that the sanding and everything is done, I could go one or two ways with this. One would be to just seal it and then paint it, or I can distress it. And certain things I'm going to need to distress now, and certain things I can distress later. And I am going to distress this and kind of beat it up, put some gashes and cuts and stuff in it. And some of the things I'm going to use to do these cuts and gashes is going to be an old X-Acto knife that I don't mind getting hot. So whenever I cut it, it spreads the cut open a little bit. And I also have a wood burner. I'm not going to show you this stuff on camera, but I will give this piece of advice when using a wood burner. This gets really, really hot. It can melt, destroy, ruin your foam really, really quick. So as soon as I plug this in, I start testing it on a piece of scrap EVA foam, and right whenever it's hot to where I want it, I will work pretty quickly to get what I need done. If I need to, I unplug it, but you just need to keep an eye on it because it gets way hotter than necessary for use on EVA foam. Okay, so you can see here some of the gashes and cuts and stuff I put in it. There will be, of course, other weathering and other things I'm going to do later. But first, now I'm going to take a brush and some Mod Podge, and I'm going to brush the Mod Podge onto this. And I'm going to keep the brush strokes flowing in the direction of the actual patterns that I put on here. So I'm going to start here and go out this way, and then coming back and going and doing the bottom, working my way from here out and around to the back. Alright, now that the Mod Podge is dried, I'm going to go ahead and paint this up with my airbrush. I'm going to use a combination of opaque black and some 40-30 mix additive, which is just a polyurethane additive you can put in with your paint. I've also taken the liberty of thinning that out. Okay. Now, you may be wondering why I don't just use spray paint. It'd be a lot quicker to use spray paint, but the whole reason that I do this is because this will dry so much quicker than spray paint. Spray paint, I have to wait 48 hours. And I've already been working on this. This is day number 3, and I've put about 30 hours into this in 3 days. Alright, now I needed to get the black more glossy. You could use an acrylic clear coat that comes in a can just like spray paint, or a lacquer, but I didn't want to wait once again the 48 hours for that to dry. So what I used was this Liquitex glazing medium, and if I can zoom in on this here, it goes great with paint. It's fluid, it's transparent, and it's glossy. Now I had to thin this out considerably with water, and then even more to put it in the airbrush, but it did get it nice and glossy, and it is drying really quickly. Alright, next I'm going to take some of this Wicked Colors by Creatix. It's called Wicked Silver, and I mixed it with some of the 40-30 additive, and then I thinned it out. And make sure this is good and shook up. Oh yeah, it's nice and thin. Okay. Probably see just how thin and runny it is. I want it good and thin because what I'm going to do with this is mist over the black. I don't want to put too much silver because then it's going to look tacky. But if I don't put enough silver, it won't look metallic. So I'm just going to start doing a fine mist over the whole entire mask. Okay, so you can see here after just one coat, it's already starting to look metallic, but like I say, I thinned it out so much that it's probably going to take a few repeated coats. There's also certain areas, like in the center of pieces, I'm going to have a little bit more metallic sheen, as opposed to in the little cracks and such, where naturally stuff would get gunked up. If you're not making your mask weathered, you can just do it all even. Alright, so I finished applying the silver overspray, and it took a few coats, and you can see in certain areas, like right in there, I applied it extra thick, because areas like that on the outside would get rubbed a lot and would be a lot shinier than like the areas and the creases in between. So that's pretty much all I did for that. Same thing up here, I put it real heavily on the edges, and much more heavily down through the center of the dome itself. And now I'm going to move on to hand painting and hand weathering for the rest of this. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and some Model Masters Chrome Silver. I'm going to paint in all these cuts that I put on it. And yeah, this is what I used. It was Model Masters Silver Chrome. And I just used that to get in these cracks here. I didn't do every single cut. Some of the cuts I left dark, but a lot of them, you know, these scratches and cuts and scrapes in the mask itself would probably be pretty shiny. And I also took and brushed a little highlights on areas like around the eyes, and you can see right here on the edge of the flashlight as well. And the light catches the silver chrome pretty good and really does bring out the shine. You can see I did the cut there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is the Predator mask. And I'm not going to try it on yet, but that's pretty much it. There is a couple things like I still have to take the masking off and hand paint that black and put some silver on it. And a few little odds and ends like that. But for right now, this is going to end part one. Part one is going to be the mask shell. And since we have the face shell done, the next part is going to be build the backside, make those dread-like appendages, and also create some fake skin. That's going to be in between this and the dread-like appendages. And that'll be in part two. But hopefully this was helpful and give you guys some ideas and some inspiration to make your own stuff. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.